guess we can do this. So,
Hello, Hope.
hi, Promise. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How you doing?
I'm doing good. So, welcome to today's session. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session.
Thank
And
you.
today we have the opportunity of, having Promise talk to us about containerized solution in Azure, and I hope you're excited. But before we
Yeah.
start, let's do some icebreaker. Let's get to know you, Promise. So I know you've been here before, but let's
Yeah.
get to know you again, just in case you have any new audience or a passerby. What can make them stop to be like,
All
okay,
right.
looks like this community
My
is
name
nice.
is Promise Uche Nwachukwu, right?
Promise, are you still with us? Mm. Hi, Promise.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you
Yeah,
hear
you
me?
broke up for a minute, but it's okay. We can hear
Oh,
you now.
all right. Okay, so like I said, this Azure space has been an interesting space for me in the past 7 years, and I've got to understand quite a lot about Azure. Although I'm still learning, but I mean it's with pleasure that I always try to share my knowledge when I can. Um, I'm also an MVP, an Azure MVP, and I mean I feel like this community is one I hold to heart, and I'm always open to sharing my knowledge with the community, you know, opening doors, opportunities as much as I can, creating opportunities for people in the community, and just, having or serving like a guide to those young ones coming up who would like to be great Azure engineers. So, I mean, that's just like a short intro on me. You can always check my profile out on LinkedIn. Just go to linkedin.com and search for Promise Uche Nwachukwu. You would see something that says Microsoft Azure MVP. Yeah, that's me.
Nice. Nice. Okay, let me ask a question
All
that
right.
so how long have you been an Azure MVP? That's one. And how
Um.
long have you
Okay.
been using Azure? Like how long have you been in the Azure or cloud space?
Okay. So I became an Azure MVP this year, right? But I have been in the cloud space for about 7 years. In fact, I remember my first job in the Azure cloud space was a technical support engineering role with Microsoft. Right. So, I mean, I had that opportunity to interface with the back end. And then over time, I grew to like a subject matter expert, you understand. And I'm telling you, it was an interesting period, because I got to learn a lot about the Azure service, and I got to teach a lot.
Hmm.
Yes. So I didn't start teaching today. I've been teaching for a very long time. I got to teach
Nice.
a lot. I got to train a lot of the engineers as well. And, I think that kind of also helped to boost my confidence on
Hmm.
what I know and how I apply the Azure. So, I mean, that I would say is my short bio or history on Azure.
Okay. Wow. That's a long time. But it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, it
Nice.
is, it is, it is.
Yeah.
Right now,
Okay.
I work with quite a number of people, and I mean, I try to let them know that look, what you are saying now is not just something from you know, that just blossomed. It's been something I have been growing over the years. You
Mm,
understand? So I tell them, you don't need to rush it. Take your time, build.
wow.
With time, you get better.
Nice.
So, I mean, that's it for me here.
Nice. Thank you. Okay, so
Yes.
going into today's session, how do let's get people excited about the session. So what
Oh,
is one thing that you want everyone to look forward to in the session? Like, even if you don't listen to any other thing, I want you to hold on to this first. So,
So, I mean, people already know about containerized solutions, right?
mhm.
But I want you to know that it's not just with your Docker. You don't need to have like a Docker software stored up in your machine to be able to build images. One of the
Mm,
interesting things you can do is that you can create your container registry in the cloud, and then
mm,
you can, from your console, build images that you can use for your deployment even without having a Docker installed on your
on
system,
your
because
system.
Azure already provides that environment for you. You just need to run some few commands, and then you're good to go. You have your image up and running, and in fact you can actually test your image over the console, and you'll get an output depending on what you've configured,
Okay, me
for
myself,
that
I'm
particular
excited
image.
already. I'm excited. Now I'm looking forward to it. That sounds good. That's a good opening. Okay, so
Yes, yes,
that
yes.
said, let's get to see how this is done and
All
how you will
right.
have to have Docker to be able to
All right.
run and you know have your container images. So I'm gonna hand over the session to you
All
and
right.
share your screen and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hope. I mean, I think that was a wonderful intro. I mean, in fact, I am a bit excited myself, but I feel like one of the interesting things to share is that when it comes to knowledge sharing, I mean, you give yourself a room where you are also available, or you are in a position where you can learn even while sharing your knowledge. So please,
Mm,
I mean, I always stand to be corrected, but in the process of sharing my knowledge, I'm just hoping that you are able to get the full gist, the full storyline, and you're able to flow with me. All right. Thank you much, everyone. So, I mean, this is just a short intro of myself. And like I said, I'm going to be speaking about implementing containerized solutions. Um, Hopefully I do intend to have a practical session that would show you how these things are being done, so that just in case you want to be able to test them yourself, you can always test them yourself, and have your containerized environment up and running. All right, so um moving on. This is just a short bio of me, and I believe I've talked about myself. So, but one of the things I just want to point out here is you can reach me on LinkedIn, right, using this link, right, and then you can also reach me up on Twitter, making use of this link, promise_uche, right. Okay, so today, like I said, we are looking at implementing containerized solution. For us to be able to understand what this is all about, right, we are going to be looking at some certain subtopics, which is one, like an introduction about what Azure Container Registry is all about. We're going to be also talking more on Azure Container Registry. We'll explore the storage capabilities for Azure Container Registry, and then we'll build and manage containers with some tasks. So basically, I'll be enlightening us on how we can build and manage containers with tasks, right? Then we do some little exploring of what a sample Docker file looks like, and then we move over to like a practical session where we can see this play out, like we are talking about it. All right, so I mean, yes, next page. So what is Azure Container Registry? I mean, I think this is a very, will I say, in demand popular question. People want to know, people want to find out, want to understand. And basically, for you to have an understanding of this, you just need to know that it's a managed service provided by Azure, right? which is based on open source Docker registry. So when they say something is based on something, meaning it was taken out from that thing and then provided you with managed services, so that imagine if if you have to set up your Docker machine, you need to install it on your system, you need to run some commands to probably build some network just to ensure that whatever containers you're spinning up are able to connect with one another, right? But this time around, Azure has created this service and made it inform that with some few codes, you can actually run the service without having to spin up Docker on your machine, right? So you see here, you can actually create and maintain Azure Container Registry to store and manage your your private Docker container images. So for instance, you have your normal images which you build on your local machine. You can also push them to Azure Container Registry, store them, use them for deployment, you know, basically almost anything you want to do with it, you have that flexibility to be able to do that. All right. So I mean, moving on, we will be looking at we right take a deep dive into Azure Container Registry. So let's let's talk more right on the service itself so that we get some understanding on how it works. All right. So now we have this scenario here, right? We have this scenario that basically shows um, what are the use cases where you can make use of Azure Container Registry. What are those use cases? So here you can see it says Azure Container Registry can be used with an existing container development and what deployment pipelines. Of course, some of you know the managed service, Azure DevOps. You know, you could make use of your container registry when you're making use of your pipelines, you know, to deploy images into your Kubernetes cluster. And then you can also use Azure Container Registry task to build container images in Azure, right? You can also build on demand or fully automated builds with triggers such as source code commits and base image updates. So basically, you have scenarios where you can actually trigger a build of an image, right? Just by pushing a code, right? Just pushing the code alone gives you that ability to be able to trigger that build. So, I mean, I feel that that is one interesting thing about this. And then it gives you the flexibility to choose which method you want to use. So, now we are looking at what the use cases, right? We are looking at the use cases, and if you see here, we are talking about the scalable orchestration system, right? So I'm sure you're asking yourself, when you say scalable orchestration systems, what do they mean, right? In this case, you are able to manage the containerized applications across clusters of hosts, including what? Kubernetes. So say for instance, you are trying to deploy an image, right? You're trying to deploy some image into your Kubernetes cluster. Now, what makes this a scalable orchestration system is the fact that you can deploy this image into multiple pods called a scalable orchestration system, right? You can also make use of Docker Swarm if you are not making use of Kubernetes for your orchestration systems. Another use case of the Azure Container Registry is the Azure service itself. And this particular service supports building, running of applications at scale, including what? Azure Kubernetes Service, app services, batch, service fabric, and other services you have on Azure. So I mean, these are just few services that make use of the Azure Container Registry. So you can see I've spoken earlier about the AKS, which is the Azure Kubernetes Service. But then, of course, you could use app services, right? And then batch services or service fabric in, building your images. So, I mean, once you have your images stored in your Azure Container Registry, you can always run them on any of these platforms, right? So for instance, it's very common for developers to be able to push images from their local host, right, to Azure Container Registry. Depends on your workflow. And just like I mentioned earlier, you can actually build your images right in Azure. You really don't need to host your Docker platform or anything like that. Just with a couple of commands, you're good to go. You're good to build those images and set your image running. In fact, you can actually test those images. Now, one of the things we want to look at today is also what we call the So all of this would determine which of the services or which of the tiers you should go for, right? So you can see here it says the Azure Container Registry is available in multiple tiers, right? Starting from the basic, right, the standard and the premium. I know you may be asking, right, what is the basic difference between the two? One thing you need to know is that for basic, it's a cost optimized entry points for developers, right? So, I mean, developers don't need to spend so much in setting up a basic tier for the Azure Container Registry, right? And it has quite some programmatic capabilities, as you can see in the standard and also in the premium. Also, you can have some integrations with Azure Directory, Azure Active Directory. Well, now that is actually known as the Entra, Microsoft Entra, right? But what I'm trying to say is you could actually
I promise. Are you still there? I think. Oh, I think we lost promise. 5 minutes. It's going to be back. So probably just some technical issues. Just a minute. Bear with us.
when you're pulling it from
I promise.
yeah.
So we lost you for like
Oh,
a brief minute. Actually, not brief. It was like really long.
oh, really? My bad,
Yeah.
my bad. Um, are you able to hear me clearly now?
We can hear you and see you clearly, but I think we stopped listening. We stopped hearing you at around when you were talking about the service tiers, like basic,
Okay. Oh,
and that was.
okay.
But yeah,
Okay.
and
So,
like I think sometimes it um, sort of freeze as well.
it freezes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I think for now is good, right? I'm just gonna try. If this prompts up, and then I'll probably switch my network to something that would,
Okay.
probably not give me issues.
All right. Sounds good.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So, I mean, just give me one more time. If this springs up, then I'll
Let
switch
you
the
know.
network.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So, like I was saying, right, we have three major service tiers. right? Three major service tiers. The first being the basic service tier, the standard service tier, and the premium service tier. Now, you may be asking me, what are the basic differences between these tier? One of the things you need to understand is that for a basic tier is actually cost optimized for developers, meaning they don't need to spend so much for their Azure Container Registry, right? And also, it has some programmatic capabilities with the standard and the premium tier, such as the Azure Active Directory authentication integration, meaning that you can be able to integrate your Azure Active Directory authentication into the Azure Container Registry, right? You can also do things such as image deletion and webhooks, right? But one thing you need to know is that for the image throughput and storage, right, they are most appropriate for lower usage scenarios. That's when you make use of the basic. So when you know that you don't really need a very high image, a very high throughput, and a very high storage, then, or you don't make use of the service as often, then you can make use of, the basic tier. Now, for the standard tier, one of the beautiful things or interesting capabilities about the standard tier is that it has more storage and throughput than your regular basic tier, right? And funny enough, the standard tier is able to satisfy the needs of most production scenarios. So that means that you don't even need a premium before you start working on production scenarios. Your standard tier actually provides you with more throughput, right, and storage, that you may be able to use this for your production scenarios. Now, for your premium tier, right, this provides you with a high amount of storage and concurrent operations, enabling a high volume of scenarios. So let's say a thousand VMs are pulling your images at the same time, right? You can be able to, achieve this using a premium tier, because one, you have a very high storage and you have the ability to run concurrent operations at the same time. Therefore, you can pull a very high number of volumes whenever you're having your operations going on in your environment. And then also, one of the beautiful things you need to know about the premium tier is that it provides you with a feature called the geo replication for managing single registry across multiple regions. What does that mean? It means that, your images are kind of backed up, right? Even with your single registry, there's like some replication available in like three other regions. So you don't need to bother about availability of that image for you, right? So premium tier provides you all of those things. It also provides you content trust for your image tag signing, and also provides you with a private link with a private endpoint to restrict access to the registry. So these are some of the features that actually make the premium tier different from the standard tier and the basic tier. Now, you may be asking yourself, what kind of images are actually supported in Azure Container Registry, right? You may be asking yourself, what kind of images are supported in Azure Container Registry? Right. So one of the beautiful things about the images that can be supported are your normal Windows images, which we are all mostly conversant with, is supported in the Azure Container Registry. Right. Your Linux image is also what supported in the Azure Container Registry. Images that you build in your Docker registry or your Docker container are supported in what your Azure Container Registry. Also, images built to the Open Container Initiative image formats are supported by the Azure Container Registry. Now, we've been able to see the various kinds of images that are supported by the Azure Azure Container Registry. Now, one of the things we also like to look at, right, is automating your image builds. Why do people automate your image builds? Anyway, automating your image builds, therefore, is a way of reducing the manual stress involved in doing all of this. I mean, I could imagine that you want to be able to streamline your building, you want to be able to test your image, you want to be able to push your image without stress and deploy your images into VMs. Now, you can do all of these functions, which include these four, right, with your ACR task. Your ACR task is like some way where you put some set of steps, right, which you want to run while automating your builds. So this is one of the interesting features that happens whenever you are building an image. Right. So we move on to the next one. Now we are looking at what are some of these benefits that the container registry has in similarity with the storage. So I mean, you know that you're dealing with images here being built, right? And as these images being built, of course they are being stored somewhere, meaning that the Azure Container Registry also makes use of some of the premium features of your storage account. So you can see here it says the basic, standard, and premium Azure Container Registry tiers benefit from advanced Azure storage features like what? Encryption at rest for images, data security, and geo-redundancy for image data protection. Remember, I said the geo-redundancy is one of the features that are provided when you make use of the premium tier for your Azure Container Registry. Now, let's take a look into what do we mean by encryption at rest. When we say encryption at rest, what we basically mean is this: all container images in your registry are encrypted at rest. It means that what Azure automatically encrypts your image before storing them and decrypts it on the fly when you or your application or services pushes the image. Can you say that? Wouldn't you say that that is a powerful feature which your Azure Container Registry has? It encrypts it before it stores the image on the platform and decrypts it on the fly, meaning in the process of your service or your application or your pipeline calling the image is automatically decrypting it for it to be available for you, but before it is stored in the Azure platform it encrypts it. I mean, that's what we mean by encryption at rest. And of course, you would know that when your image is encrypted, there are some security issues you are not bothered about, meaning that someone cannot just come and have direct access to your image in the Azure Container Registry without your permission. In fact, this is one of the beautiful things where integrating Microsoft Entra or Azure Active Directory authentication into your Azure Container Registry. This is one of the beautiful things or scenarios where this would actually make a lot of impact, because you can actually control who is able to get access to your Azure Container Registry. Now, one of the other things we want to look at is regional storage. Why do we say regional storage? Azure Container Registry itself stores the data in the region where the registry is created, right? To help customers meet data residency and compliance requirements. This is one of the main things that Azure does for you, right? So, for instance, you know that there are instances where there are some regulations in some countries that says a certain amount of or a certain kind of data cannot be found outside of that country. Now, once you are able to have a a server, or a location in Azure where it's similar to your country's location, you can spin up your Azure Container Registry and push your image there and have a rest of mind that your image is only going to be in that region where you set up your Azure Container Registry. So that means you don't need to bother about, oh, maybe there is some issue with breaking your regulations or compliance requirements. In fact, Azure may be able to store the registry data in a paired region in the same geography. So in cases like, I mean, there are similar regions where, or similar places we could say they have the same geography. For instance, Brazil South and Southeast Asia regions, right? Those are there are regions that are actually close to one another, and therefore can accommodate data residency requirements for those regions. Also, imagine if a region outage occurs, the registry data may become unavailable, right? And isn't automatically recovered. But when you have them available in more than one region, in more than one region, in the sense that they are paired, those paired regions, right? So imagine if you have a scenario like that where, the region where you are, hosting or storing or created your Azure Container Registry is being paired with a similar region around that country. You don't have the issue of inavailability to access your images. And also, for scenarios where you want to have your image in, multiple regions, so that in case issues come in, you can always set up this in your container registry. And like I said, that's why we have the geo replication feature. So you see here, it says customers who wish to have their registry data stored in multiple regions for better performance across different geographies, or wish to have a resiliency in the event of a regional outage, should what? Enable geo replication. So for geo replication, it means that your image can actually be stored in various regions. And then once it's stored in various regions, those images can't go unavailable at the same time. Meaning that if a region goes down, there's another region to make that image available. Now, talking about zone redundancy, right? Because remember, we are looking at the benefits of using Azure Container Registry, right? Now, talking about zone redundancy, it's a feature for the premium service tier. This particular feature is basically for the premium service tier, right? The zone redundancy itself uses Azure availability zones to replicate the data, or to replicate your registry to a minimum of what? Three separate zones in each enabled region. So imagine in the same region, you can replicate your data across three enabled zones, or three separate zones, right? This provides you with what we call zonal or zone redundancy. So, I mean, even in that region where I know the whole region can't just go out at once, but if a zone goes out, there are other zones that can make your data or your Azure Container Registry images available to you. Another feature or another benefit of making use of the Azure Container Registry is what the ability for scalable storage. So you can see here it says Azure Container Registry allows you to create as many repositories, images, layers, or tags as you need, up to what the registry storage limit. So of course there are defined storage limits for each registry, and of course you can always check that out and make that particular part aware, so that you can know what the storage limits are for which regions and for which of the tiers, so that you are aware on, how or what amount of images you can store in each of the tiers. So it says here, it says high number of repositories and tags can impact the performance of your registry. So I mean, you don't really want to just keep a lot of images you're not making use of. So if you know that you're not making use of the images, it's always good to periodically delete those images or repositories or tags that you are no longer making use of. So it says, I mean, deleted registry resources like repositories, images, and tags can't be recovered after deletion. So currently, we don't have such features to enable you recover them after you've what? Deleted them. Now let's go over to the next one, which is build and manage containers. Yeah, build and manage containers. Right. So when we're talking about the building and your management of containers, one of the things we want to um one of the things we want to point out here when you are building and managing your containers is basically how can you make use of the automation features to be able to automate, this building process. Of course, I know you don't want to always run this manually, so you want to be able to automate the process so that that manual work is kind of off your hands. So the ACR task itself is a suite of features within what the Azure Container Registry, and it provides a cloud-based container image building for platforms including Linux, Windows, Azure Resource Manager, and can also automate OS and framework patching for what your Docker container tasks or your Docker containers, right? So ACR itself enables you to be able to automate builds triggered by either what source code updates to container-based image or timers. So I don't know, for some of you who may have been used to making use of Azure DevOps service. One of the very things that are done in Azure DevOps service is the fact that when you are deploying stuffs, most times you get to build your images, right? So these are some of the things you do actually when you build your images. One, you can do a quick task. What does a quick task actually mean? In this scenario, is basically about building and pushing single container images towards a container registry on demand. You understand? So it's like basically, on your normal local repo, you can actually build your image on your local machine, and then with Docker push, you can push it to what Azure Container Registry. Right. Another thing again which you can do is what automatically trigger tasks. So some of you that are used to, you know, Azure DevOps Service or other DevOps processes, you will know that one, you can trigger source code updates, right? So on the when you make changes to your source code, you can have a trigger being set up such that once the update is detected, it automatically starts building the image. You can also have a trigger on your base image update. This means that once there is an update on your base image, be it a Linux distribution or a Windows distribution, a new build is automatically triggered. And then you can also now start making use of that new build in your applications where you are hosting them in various environments. And then you can also what trigger on schedule. So for your automatically triggered task, you have the quick tasks, the automated tasks, which are the ones that are for your automatically triggered task, yeah, you have trigger based on source code updates, trigger based on image update, and what trigger based on what schedule. So when I mean schedule is that maybe you will say every 5 p.m. or every 5 a.m. in the morning, I want this particular procedure to run such that it's going to build my image and push it towards Azure Container Registry. So those are some of the things where you can do to automatically, when using automatically triggered task. Now, another task scenario you can make use of is the multi-step task. Well, for the multi-step task, right, this is basically like a single email build and push capability of Azure Container Registry, meaning you may have multi-steps which may include what multiple containers. So you can have multiple steps to build what images for multiple containers, right? And then one thing you have to do is that each ACR task, Azure Container Registry task, has an associated source code context. This means that there is actually a source code for each of the tasks. That's one thing you have to know. Right. So, We've basically talked about the task scenarios, the quick task, automatically trigger task, and the what? The multi-step task. Now, let's move on to what does a Docker file look like. So basically, right, when building an image, one of the things you want to do is you want to make use of a Docker file. What your Docker file does for you is that it contains a step by step process of how you want the image to be built. Say, for instance, it says here a Docker file is a script that contains a series of instructions that can be used to build a Docker image. So let's see one. The first thing you want to do is that you want to have a base image where you are going to be running new updates on. Here it says the base or parent image we use to create a new image. So you have to realize that no image comes out of a thin air. There is always a base or parent image. Two, command to update the base OS and install other softwares are what you can find in your Docker file. Three, build artifacts to include, such as your developed application. You can copy them your Azure into your Docker file which you are building, right? You can manually copy them, right? Like just using the copy commands to run those files into your application. And then you can expose the service, such as storage and network configuration, to allow access into that application. And then you can command to run when the container is being launched. So you can put an entry point which you would like to be launched. You understand, when the container is being run. Now, we will look at a sample Docker file and just see what it takes. So I'm not going to waste so much time here because I want us to do a practical session to build a sample um, container registry, right? And from there, we can then proceed to, see what it's like. So basically, for your Docker file, one of the things you want to do, right? This is the base image. So you see from here, meaning this is the base image. Now, the working directory which I want the app to have is going to be /app. And then I copy these files. Of course, these files are present on my local machine. I'm going to copy them into the image, going to expose port 80, and then the command I want the application to run when it's launched is what? The .NET command and the my app.dll. Of course, you can make use of several commands, right? You can actually make use of several commands when your app is being launched. So let's quickly go into a practical session so I show you how this work. Let me see. Let me share my screen. So I'm going to open portal.azure for you so you have a look on some of the resources I already have. Let's see. Just a minute. Okay, so one thing before I remove this screen, right? We are going to be using these commands to what? Create the repository, right? We'll create a repository, we'll build and push an image from a Docker file, we'll verify the results, and then we'll run the image to see if everything goes fine. So that's what we are going to be doing for our practical session. This shouldn't take long anyway. So let me stop sharing that screen and share another screen. Just a minute. All right. Okay. Okay. I'm going to share my Azure portal. So I'm sharing my Azure portal now. Let me increase this. so that everyone can see what I'm doing. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is let me open a shell command prompt in the Azure portal since we are going to be. So I'm just going to be saying cloud shell, yeah. So this will open the shell prompt for us. Now, like I made mention of, the first thing we want to do, okay, like I made mention of, the first thing, sorry about this. Yes, the first thing we want to do in this scenario here is ability to create a resource group. So, for instance, we want to make use of, we want to be able to create a resource group where our Azure Container Registry is going to be um, holding on. So, what I want to do is I want to make use of this subscription. So I can say AZ set. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, let me say set easy context. So this is the subscription I want to be using for my deployment, right? So once I've set that, the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to create a resource group in that subscription. So I'm going to say something like this. Um, so this is the command I want to use, right? So let's see, let's say I want to create I want to create a resource group in, let me say, East US. Just put this into some quote here, East US, and I want to name the resource group. Let me say Azure class, right? So I'm going to go ahead to create this resource group in East US. So this is the resource group. Oh, okay. So one of the things I noticed is that this resource group was created in another subscription, which I don't want. So one of the things you can do to specify where exactly you want your subscription to be created is by doing something like this. Okay, let me see. I think I'm having some. Okay, good. Let me see. Let me do an hashtag here. Okay, good. Okay, now I'm going to repeat same command. This time I'll just say AZ group create, right? And I will specify the subscription I want this created in. So I'll specify the subscription, and yeah, this is the subscription I want it created in. So I'm just going to do this. Yeah, I'll place this here. Yeah, so what it's going to do is that it's going to create that resource group in East US in that particular subscription. So if you can see right now, you will notice here that it has created it in this particular subscription. So now I have a new resource group called Azure class, right, in particular subscription. The next thing I want to do is I want to be able to create the um, container Azure Container Registry, right? So we are going to use this to create the Azure Container Registry. So I'm going to do something like this, and I'm going to paste this, right? Good. So basically, we are going to be having something like this ACR, which is the command to create a Azure Container Registry, I'll say create, right? What this will do is that I can specify the resource group to say -G, right? And then I will say, remember the resource group we created here is what? Azure class, Azure-class. And then the name, I'll give it a name and say, let me say, Azure class ACR. Let me say ACR Azure class, right? And then I need to specify the SKU, right? Remember I said we have 3 SKUs, right? So I need to specify the SKU, right? This time around I'm choosing basic. So we have the basic, we have the standard, and we have the premium. And I told you that for most developers, they actually make use of the basic, right? So in order not to be confused, I need to set the subscription where I want to deploy this particular Azure Container Registry, because I have a couple of subscriptions, so I don't want it to get mistaken for which subscription is talking about. So I need to specify the subscription. So here this goes. So what it's going to do now is it's going to try to run the command. Okay, okay. All right. So I'm not supposed to make use of the hyphens, I guess. So let's do this. Let's do this. Let me see. Okay. Okay. Let me do this. I'm just going to here. I'll do something like remove the hyphens. I'll see ACR. Um, Maybe here I can make use of my middle name to, yeah, just to give it a unique name, because every ACR has to be unique. That's something you have to know. Every ACR has to be unique. So I'll specify the subscription, right? And then I'll run the command again. So let's see what happens. Oh, okay, good. So you can see now that actually it's run the command. Maybe I should reduce this. So you would get to see all of the things that happen. So basically what it has done here, if you can see, is that it basically creates the ID. You can see this is the ID under the resource group, the provider, Microsoft.this registries as ACR Uche class. So you can see the ACR itself has been created, right? So let me enlarge the screen again so that it's a bit visible for everyone. Now, the next thing I want to do is what? I want to be able to create a Docker file that I will use in building the image. So I will just do this something easy, not so difficult, right? Okay, so I think I actually have, okay, let me see. Yeah, let me run this. Okay, now I am going to then create a sample Docker file using this here. So it's basically something like this. So you may be wondering why I put the hashtag before the command. The reason I do that is because sometimes once you put some figures into the screen or some letters into it, automatically executes the command. And because I don't want it to execute something wrong, I do that. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm running the echo command and putting from microsoft.mcr.microsoft.com hello world. So this is the base image I want to use, and I want to put that into my Docker file. So that's the meaning of this command. So I'm going to execute that. What it's basically going to do is going to create a Docker file with that base image. So if I run a command, say cat Docker file, you can see this is the content of the Docker file. Now, the next thing I want to do is to be able to build an image from that Docker file. So I'm going to build an image right now from the Docker file, right? So let me use my hashtag like I always do, right? Like I said, this basically is just to ensure that it's not running something I don't want it to run. All right, so you can see here, this is the command to use. Remember, the registry we created is what? ACR Uche class. Yeah, that's the name of the registry we created. ACR Uche class. If you're in doubt, you can see the name here, ACR Uche class. This is the name we created. So that's the name we created, and then I need to also, okay, so you can see ACR build. This is the image I want to build. So I'm going to be building this image, right, based off on my own registry, and it's going to be running from that Docker file. Now, because I don't want any form of confusions, right, I can just specify the subscription I want it to look at. Remember, the reason I'm adding this subscription is because I know I have multiple subscriptions. But if you don't, there may be no need for you to do that. So I'm going to be picking this. I'll pick this and then I'll add it here. And then let's see. I believe it should build the image. So you can see, right, that it's actually starting to build the image for us. It's actually starting to build the image for us. You can see packing source code into tar to upload. So what it's going to do is that it's actually making use of the Docker image provided in the cloud, right? So this is the part where I was telling you that you don't need to have your Docker image running locally within your system. You can actually make use of Azure, right, in doing this. So you can see that it had actually built the image successfully. So you can see what he had to do. One of the things he had to do was he needed to download the source code, right? And then after downloading the source code, he needed to authenticate into the registry we built, right? And then you can see here it says successfully logged into the Azure registry, right? Now, once it has logged into the registry, it's going to launch a container with the name build, right? And it's going to start building from the Docker file. Remember, this was what we had in our Docker file. So it's going to pull the image, verify the image, complete the pull, and then it's going to do some building. So you can see here, it built the image and then it tagged the image. And after doing that, it prepared it and pushed it up for us into what our ACR. So you can see here it says successfully pushed the image into what the ACR. So now if we go into our Azure environment under that subscription, if we go to Container Registry, right, you can see here that we have an ACR Uche class, right? And then when we go to our repositories, we should be able to see an image. Yeah, you can see the image in the repository, and then you can see the image tag, right? So one of the things you can also do is you can verify these tags even from your console. You can verify the tags. I know the time is almost due, but I'll be rounding up in a bit, right? So for us to be able to verify the tag or the image, we can run this command here just to verify the image, right? So you can see all we just need to do is specify the registry name here, and that's ACR Uche class. ACR Uche class, right? That's all we needed to do to specify the registry name. So we run that command and see. I'm not specifying subscription here. Let me see if it oh, good. It automatically picked the subscription, right? So the next thing you can see here, it was able to what tell us the tagging which we did, which we tagged the image, right? Or sorry, the image name which we built, sample hello world. Now, if we want to be able to check the tag, it tag the image, we can run this command to do that, right? We can run this command to do that. This will tell us what tag, right? It tagged it as. All we need to do here is change this to the repository name. Yeah, I mean the Azure Container Registry name. Yes, we just need to change this to what ACR Uche class, right? And then we run the command, right? So this should show us the tag which it tagged the repository. So you can see it tagged it v1, and then if you check your environment, you will confirm it is being tagged here as v1, right? So you can see that's the tagging, and this is the repository that was created in the what in the ACR, right? So the next thing we can do is to see if we can run this image. So can we run this image now and test to see if we can get the same output which the image is expected to give in a local environment? Let's run this online. Let's run it on the cloud environment, and let's see what outputs we are going to get. This is going to be the last command we'll be running. So we do this, right? So as usual, I mean, we'll just come here and put in the container registry here, which is ACR Uche class, and then yeah, so you can see this. Let's run. What we are doing now, we are running the image itself to see what does that image contain. What will be the output from running that image? So okay, so I guess it's looking for it in another subscription. So I just need to specify the subscription I want it to look at. So I want you to take a look at this subscription. Just a minute, let me confirm that subscription here. This is the subscription I want you to take a look at. All right, so I'm going to be pasting that here, and then we'll try running it again, and let's see what happens. So you can see right now, you can see it's queued a run with IDC A2 waiting for the agent, right? Once it waits for the agent, you can see the next thing it tries to do, it sets up a Docker network, which will connect to the image, and then sets up a Docker configuration, logs into the registry, and executes the last step, which was to run the image, right? So it says here, one, it's unable to find this image locally. Remember, it's running this on a container in the cloud, right? So if that container doesn't have the image, one of the things it's going to do is going to start pulling the image. So you see, it's pulling what? The image which we created. Once it downloads it and it pulls it completely, it now gives us the status of that image. So on that image, if this were to be like something I was running locally and I expose it on port 80, I should be able to see this when I open a tab on my browser with a specified network. I should be able to see this message. So the same message which I can see on my local machine is what I am currently seeing on my output screen here. So it says here, to generate this message, Docker took the following steps. So you can see all of this. So I mean, this is just to show you the beautiful fact that you can actually build your image, right? Run it, and test that your image works, making use of the cloud. Some few commands you run with the AZACR, and you have a lot of things you can be able to execute. Now you may be wondering, what other things can I do? Some other things you can do is you can check out AZACR, and you put the command here, help. This will list a couple of the functions which you can carry out when you run the command. So you can see, with the AZACR command, you can do a lot. You can see you can build, check health, check name, create, delete, import, list, login, run. You can even show your endpoints and what users are being used to log in, right? You can show that, and then you can see what users are being used to log into your container registry. So, I mean, this is just a sample of the beautiful things that your container registry can do for you. So, those of you looking at, managing your Azure Container Registry or making use of Azure Container Registry, this is a sample of the beautiful things you can do with it. So, I mean, at this point, I will just call out for if anyone has any question they would like to ask, and let me see if I can provide some answers to that. Any questions on implementing containerized solutions? Does anyone have any questions on implementing containerized solutions?
Wait. There's currently no question on the chat, so
All right, all
I
right,
don't
all
know.
right.
Maybe we'll wait a minute for anyone to ask their questions. Just 1 minute.
Yes. Well, I mean, I know that the time is
Yeah, we're
fast
past
spent,
9 minutes.
so I think we can. So I mean, what you can do is, like I said, if you want to reach out to me, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on Twitter, and then just let me know, right? If you have any questions, and I mean, I'm available to answer those questions to for you, right? So hit me up, ask me your questions, and I'll be able to provide some answers to you. But at this time, I think we can round up the session for today.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Promise, for the
You're
insightful
welcome.
session. I'm
You're
sure
welcome.
everyone did learn enough. I'm sure everybody like learned a lot from the session, and I know we didn't have any question, but at least we had some thank you messages.
Yeah,
So,
true, true,
um,
true.
yeah, so yeah, in the absence of any question, I think we'll just say thank you so much for taking the time today to share some of your amazing knowledge with us, and and yeah, so
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Okay, yeah. I was trying to linger on in case anybody had one or two last minute questions, but looks like
Oh,
you
all
did a
right.
good job in explaining
All
every
right.
single thing that people were so clear on everything. So
All, all
it's
right.
okay.
All right. I'm happy I was able to do that. I'm happy I was able to do
Oh,
that.
someone said the content was golden. Awesome. Okay.
Ah, nice. Nice. I'm happy about that.
Okay.
I'm happy
All right.
about that. Yes, yes. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm happy I was able to share the little I know on containerized solutions, and of course, we have further sessions planned for this particular series. So please be expectant. We are going to be running more topics on this particular series, and we'll keep you updated as this goes on. And of course, if you haven't joined our pages, please ensure to go to LinkedIn, follow our pages, click on them. If you haven't registered on our meetup page, please ensure to go to the meetup page, register there, and that will ensure that anytime an event is being created, you are going to get an email, you are going to be aware about it. If you haven't followed us on all our other social media channels, please ensure you do so. Also click on the subscribe on this particular channel, right? Subscribe on this channel so you also get updated anytime we are going live. I mean, I
Yeah, and
think
you
these
get
are some of the
notification.
benefits you have for joining the community you know
Yeah. Thank you so much. I just wanted to take one last question. Someone's asking if this is weekly. Yes, this particular series is weekly. It happens every week, and we you have the opportunity to hear from different speakers. So we usually have a mix of different speakers taking different topics, and you get to learn from different perspectives. So yeah, every week, same time, there is another session happening next week as well and all that. So like Promise said, please tune in and come learn as much as possible from the amazing speakers we have lined up. And if you follow us on various social media handles, you will definitely get notified about any the next session, any new session coming up, or even if there is any new event or any new program. So, with that said, thank you once again, Promise, for today's session. Thanks again to everyone who watched this, on, or who's going to watch this later. Thanks for staying to the end, and thanks. Hope you learned a thing or two. With that said, we look forward to seeing you at our next event, session, or training, whichever one. But stay safe and stay good.